The rain came down in soft, endless sheets over Boston that October evening, the kind that makes streetlights look like they're crying amber tears. Marcus Reed stood under the narrow awning of the old Commonwealth Avenue brownstone, collar turned up, watching water pool around his boots. He was late for the gallery opening, again, and already regretting the decision to walk instead of taking the T. Across the street, under a much smaller umbrella that was losing the fight, stood Eleanor Hayes. She was trying and failing to keep her sketchbook dry while simultaneously wrestling with the umbrella and her phone. A gust of wind snatched the umbrella inside out. She laughed, not the polite kind of laugh people do when they're embarrassed, but the unguarded, surprised kind that makes strangers turn their heads. Marcus crossed without really deciding to cross. "Need a hand?" he asked, voice low enough that it didn't startle her. Eleanor looked up. Raindrops clung to her eyelashes. She blinked once, twice. "I need about 6 more hands and maybe a new zip code," she said, then immediately winced at how ridiculous that sounded.
"Sorry. Hi.
I'm a disaster." "Marcus," he said, stepping under what remained of her umbrella and taking it from her fingers before it could invert again. He righted it with one smooth motion. "And you're not a disaster. You're just aggressively fighting physics." She studied him for a second, really studied him, the way artists sometimes do, like they're already sketching the shape of someone in their head. "I'm Ellie," she said. "And thank you. My sketchbook is the only thing between me and complete existential collapse tonight." He glanced at the saturated edges of the pages she was shielding against her chest. "You're going to the Atticus opening? How'd you guess?" "Because only people who care too much about art would be out here trying to drown themselves for it." She smiled, small, real.
"Guilty."
They walked the remaining 4 blocks together under her battered umbrella. He held it high enough for both of them. She stayed close enough that their shoulders brushed every few steps. Neither of them commented on it. Inside the gallery, the air was warm, thick with wine and cedar and quiet arguments about brushwork. Marcus had come because the featured painter, a friend from grad school, had begged him to show up and look like I know what I'm talking about. Ellie had come because one of the smaller pieces, a charcoal study of a woman laughing in rain, was hers. They found themselves standing in front of it at the same time. Marcus tilted his head. "This is good," he said simply. Ellie's cheeks went pink. "You don't have to say that. I don't say things I don't mean." He looked at her instead of the drawing. "You caught the moment someone realizes they're happy. Most people only paint the before or the after. You painted the hinge." She didn't know what to do with that, so she took a sip of cheap Pinot and asked, "What do you do when you're not rescuing sketchbooks?" "Teach history at BU. Reconstruction, Jim Crow, civil rights." The long, ugly, beautiful argument America keeps having with itself. Ellie nodded slowly. "Heavy suitcase." "Sometimes." He shrugged one shoulder. "But there's joy in the cracks. Always has been." They talked until the gallery staff started stacking chairs. They talked on the sidewalk after, rain still falling, softer now. They talked in the doorway of the 24-hour diner on Newberry when neither of them wanted to say goodnight yet. They talked until the sky turned the bruised purple that comes right before dawn. He walked her to her building in the South End. She stopped on the stoop. "I don't usually do this," she said. "Do what?" "Let someone walk me home after knowing them for 4 hours." He smiled, slow, careful. "I don't usually offer." She looked up at him, raindrops caught in her hair like tiny diamonds. "Then maybe we're both breaking pattern tonight." He reached out, brushed a wet strand from her cheek with his thumb. The touch was so light she almost didn't feel it, except she felt it everywhere. "Ellie," he said quietly, "can I see you again?" She rose on her toes and kissed him, soft at first, testing, then deeper when he kissed her back like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission. His hands found her waist. Hers slid inside his coat, against the warmth of his shirt. The rain kept falling. Neither of them cared. When they finally pulled apart, foreheads resting together, breath visible in the cold air, she whispered, "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," he promised. And tomorrow became coffee at 7 a.m. on a bench in the public garden while the swan boats were still docked for winter. It became long walks along the Charles when the wind cut through their coats, and they didn't mind. It became her sketching him while he graded papers, charcoal smudged on her nose. It became him reading Langston Hughes aloud to her in bed on Sunday mornings, voice low and steady, while snow tapped the window like it wanted in. It became the night he told her about his grandmother who marched in Selma and still called him every Sunday to make sure he was eating greens. It became the afternoon. She showed him the tiny scar on her knee from falling off her bike when she was 9, and how her father had carried her 2 miles home rather than let her walk on it. It became arguments, quiet ones about privilege and history and fear, and the even quieter apologies that followed. It became forgiveness that felt like breathing. It became love, not loud, not perfect, not colorblind in the shallow way people sometimes pretend it can be. It was love with eyes open, seeing each other clearly, scars and all, history and all, fear and hope and stubborn joy and all. One spring evening, almost a year later, they stood on the same stretch of Commonwealth Avenue where the rain had first pushed them toward each other. The trees were heavy with blossom. Petals drifted like slow confetti. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Ellie's breath caught. "I've spent most of my life studying moments when the country tried to tear itself apart," he said. "I want the rest of mine to be about building something that stays together." He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band with a single tiny sapphire, blue like the Charles at dusk. "Marry me, Ellie?" Tears welled, spilled, mixed with laughter. "Yes," she said, and then again softer, "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. She kissed him, fierce, certain home. And somewhere in the city, the rain began again, gentle this time, like it was blessing them both.